Hey folks, it's time for TWiP Photo Critique number 101. This is TWiP. Hey, welcome back to another This Week in Photo TWiP Pro Photo Critique. Something special this week. I'm here with a good friend of mine, Mr. Blake Rudis, who is from a little site called f64academy.com. So we're gonna be talking about his site a little bit before we dive in. But his main function here, obviously, is to guest critique the images that were submitted last week. Last week, Troy Miller picked the topic of found in the garden. That was the topic for this week's critique. So we're going to keep that in mind as we step through the submissions for this week. And at the end, Mr. Blake Rudis has a very special topic for us for next week. So stay tuned for that. Blake Rudis, man, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Good. How are you? This is an honor.
You know, this honor's all mine. I'm a big fan. So before we dive into all this stuff, for the people that may not have heard of your site and things that you do online, give us the elevator pitch.
Sure. So I basically started F64 Academy, and not because I like to shoot at F64, because I get that joke quite a bit, but because F64 is basically an homage and a tribute to our founding fathers, Group F64, of those people like Ansel Adams and Imogen Cunningham and all those phenomenal photographers in the early 1940s that kind of paved the way for us as landscape photographers. So that's where F64 comes from. The term Academy comes from the fact that I want to basically create tack sharp Photoshop and photography content for you. So that's where you put F64 and Academy together, and I'm trying to build the most elite Photoshop education on the internet. But
That's
we
awesome.
have to have that pitch. But at the same time, I've got so many good friends that do the same thing. So I'm like, man, I don't really want to be in competition with anybody.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot. It's a big pool, right? It's a big pool.
Yeah.
So, that's cool. So how's it going? You've been doing the Academy for how long now? How many years?
F64 Academy has been around since 2010, but I rebranded. It was Everyday HDR back in the day when I was like crazy into HDR photography. And I rebranded out of that in 2016 to F64 Academy. So F64 Academy has been around for just about 4 years now. And then its sister site is F64 Academy Elite.com. F64 Academy Elite, or F64Elite.com is the subscription-based model, where if you want to get critique sessions, kind of like what you do here with live events and courses and all that other stuff, then there's F64Elite.com.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I am unapologetically and blatantly looking at you for guidance on how my site goes. So,
Well, the thing is, like, I look at your stuff, you look at my stuff, we both say, ooh, how'd you do that? But it's just like photography post-production when it comes to website building, is that we all bring something really clever and cool to the table. And, sharing that stuff, we can only grow. So I'm open.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, cool. So thank you again for agreeing to do this today. This is fantastic. This is a treat, I think, for me and for the audiences as well, to get a different perspective on their images. And there's some pretty good images in there for us to dive into and what we call nitpick them. So we sort of give constructive criticism with a side helping of nitpickery. So so your job is chief nitpicker today. So
no.
So take the gloves
I'm used
off.
to being so warm and cuddly. I don't know if I can do this.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So inside baseball, everybody, this guy is military. So I'm ex-military. He's military. So don't believe that warm and cuddly.
Yeah, I know. Well, especially I'm a first sergeant too, so I'm really not warm and cuddly if you're in my
Not
outfit.
warm and cuddly. You don't want to get sent to the first sergeant's office. I'm just saying.
A good thing I only do that 1 week in a month and 2 weeks a year.
There you go. That's good. Cool. All right. Let's you want to dive in? Take a look at these things? All right. Let me go ahead and screen share the community. All right, here we are in TWiP Pro. And as folks know, this is the outgoing TWiP Pro. The new one will be launching very, very soon. And this one will be Legacy, but we still love it. So the first image up is from Armando, member Armando Brook. And let's take a look at this one. Bring that up. All right. So this is the first image. This is your very first image to critique on This Week in Photo, Blake Rudis.
Very nice.
Yeah.
It's a good one. It's a good one. So typically when I run my critiques, I talk about what works, what I would possibly consider to help emphasize the photo, make it a little bit better, and then how you could fix that in Photoshop. So I'm going to kind of just use that same formula here. So what works for me is the composition. I think the composition works really well. The texturing that's been done in the background, I really like it, because a lot of times with wildlife photography, those backgrounds can be really boring or really chaotic. Yeah. So by doing this almost like texture vignette, behind them, I think that's great. Now, if they were actually in front of like a, birch tree or something like that, or whatever that is behind them, I don't know. But if they're actually in front of that, then great. But otherwise, it looks like a really nice texture has been laid back there. And I don't feel like there's too much that's really distracting me from the interaction between the mother bird and the child. And I think that's really cool. And the moment of anticipation here of like, oh, that's mine. 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 That's awesome. I think that's great. And then the mother bird's like, yep, look at me. Yeah, I got this. Yeah. I did it. I'll go back and do it again for dinner. Just like we do for our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What do you think about the vignette, though? I feel like the vignette might be a little bit heavy-handed in the upper right-hand corner and down the left side.
It is a little heavy-handed in some places, but the direction of where you want me to view is right there, and I like that. I like it when a photographer gives me a deliberate place to look. Sometimes it can be overdone, but what I'm seeing here is that vignette is not tone compression. The difference between a regular vignette and what people usually throw on Adobe Camera Raw or Lightroom, they just throw that vignette on the top. And then the areas where the vignette covers over highlight areas, you get this almost milky type of bad HDR look, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Which you would see that in that lower right-hand corner there. But I think what they've done with this is that you don't actually get that tone compression. So whatever vignetting process they're using, they're doing it very deliberately. It's not vignetting over the top of the mother bird's head, and it's very deep. So it's deep and focused. Yeah. Now, if it was a vignette that was just a big and, it's almost like that 1970s look, I think I'd be a little frustrated by it. But this, I think it's deliberate. It's putting me right to where it wants me to be.
Yeah. No, I agree. And then you see that little string or the branch or something that's kind of in front of the baby bird there?
Yep.
What about that? Would you have taken that out, or would you leave that in?
Yeah, I would take that out. Yeah, because, our eyes are attracted to three things when we look at a photograph, typically. Areas of highest highlight first. That's why people tell you not to blow out your highlights. Areas of highest saturation. And then typically areas of what's in focus and what's out of focus. Now, when we have that thing that's going in front of the baby bird, it's in the highest saturated area with that yellow. It's also one of the highest highlights, and it's also one of the most in focus things. Yeah. So now you take that combination and everything. While I want to enjoy that scene between the two of them, I'm drawn right to that. I don't know if it's like a piece of fishing line or drool. I mean, this bird's like, man, I want that bird. I want that worm. So I'm going to just drool all over the place. So I probably would clone that out, and I'd probably clone out the little twig, little things that are off on the left hand
rock
side.
There. Yeah. Yep. I agree.
Yeah. Cool. Other than that, I think it's really cool. Really good.
All right, Armando, you get the seal of approval. All right, next shot up is from Karen Sweeney. All right, and again, folks, I'm not reading the captions on these in the interest of time, because at the end of this, Blake is going to take one of these images and do some post-processing on it, so we don't want to use up all that time. All right, here's the next one from Karen Sweeney. This looks like this is an artistic sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Abstract. Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. I wish I could grow guitars in my garden, because then I'd be rich.
Yeah, that's right. Remember, this is found in the garden. That's the topic. So your image has to fit in with the topic of the critique.
No, that's just a joke. But I think the cool thing here is that, you've incorporated probably two things that you really enjoy, whether that's, gardening and, music, whatever that might be. So that's kind of what I'm seeing here. And you're using them together to create some type of digital art. And I really do enjoy the digital art. I critique a lot of that stuff. Mm-hmm. One thing that I'm wondering here, like I like the composition. I like where you're going from with this, but there's some things that are kind of throwing me off a little bit. And if I'm looking over on the left side, there's like this big black box over there.
Yeah.
So that becomes like this life-sucking black hole where I want to enjoy what you've got in the center of the photo or off to that right-hand side, but I just keep getting sucked right into this big black void, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is. So that makes it more mysterious, kind of like what we see black holes in space. We don't know what they are. So everyone really wants to know what they are. So they're trying to do all this research on it. Yeah. So I'm actually taking a lot of my time looking at that part of the photograph when I want to be enjoying the rest of it. I think you're onto something here, though, with this. I think it's a really interesting composition. I think you are. It looks like it might be either a dual exposure or a long exposure that's been with the camera moved or something like that, which I think that's creating something really, really cool here. Maybe even a rear curtain flash that's going on here, too. But one thing I would also suggest beyond that black, even if I just take my hand and I crop this in a way that I just see the base of the guitar and the green foliage down there, I'm seeing a much more intriguing composition without that black hole there. But with that, I think you've got a bunch of colors that are going on here, and I would tell you to be bold with one of them. So take one of those colors and say, I'm going to make you look at this. So either that's the green, the orange, or the purple, but something that just says, hey, this is the color I think that this piece is about. It's kind of like when you have a living room and all the walls are like a grayish color, and then you just decide you get a wild hair to paint one blue wall, you know, out of this whole gray room. Then the whole discussion becomes about that blue wall. Yeah. Right.
Yep. Absolutely.
And I think that right now we have a gray living room, so to speak. But give me one color where you're just like, this is the accent I want you to focus on.
Yeah, you gotta have something in there to pop it. Yeah, I agree with the rectangle being distracting, and I like the analogy of the black hole. It's for sure, because it kind of pulls you into. Black has a lot of weight to it, so it's pulling you into that left side of the frame, and then it leaves you wondering, like, why is that there? And then, like you said, when you hold up your hands to sort of block off that black rectangle. And if she said, you know what, like the oranges in the guitar are going to be the hero or my accent color, and she popped those out, then it becomes much more intentional. You're like, okay, I know what she's going for here. So,
absolutely.
Yep. Cool shot, though. Thanks, Karen. All right. Next shot up is from Michael Ryno.
I like that name.
Yeah, that's a cool name. That's pretty a superhero cool name.
It is. That's a superhero black and white, too.
It is.
So I really do like the succulent look, you know, where you like you just get up close to those succulents because there's so many layers like an onion, and the petals, they just look so thick and tactile, like you can touch them. When I used to live out in California, I used to try to get shots like this all the time, but maybe it wasn't the lens or my vision just wasn't there. I just couldn't do it, you know. So I can appreciate this shot because of all my failed attempts at the succulent photography. But I really enjoy here is that, you know, typically when I tell people to do black and white on a traditional basis, I say, okay, the stars of the show are black and white. So you have to have black in there and you have to have white in there, and they have to be clear. And then the midtones become the supporting actors to kind of help those black and white become successful within the movie, right? Yeah. But with this, I think it's all about the midtones, and the supporting actors are the black and the white. And then the midtones are like, hey, we're the star of the show. And it works. It works really well with that kind of low contrast type of feel because it adds to the delicate nature of me wanting to touch that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that decision was great. To instead of going high key or low key, you stayed right in the middle ground and said, you know what, I'm gonna make this feel almost pastel, you know, very monochromatic pastel type of feeling. It's obviously monochromatic because it's black and white, but it gives it that pastel nature, almost to the point that if I close my eyes and open them, I could see this as like a pastel blue or a pastel pink or a pastel yellow, just because of the very clean nature of those midtones.
Yeah, these kinds of shots, especially these close-up shots, succulent or otherwise, like when I look at it, I'm looking deeper into them. I'm looking at the texture on the different petals in there, and that's sort of drawing me in and making me feel what this plant really felt like at the time. Yeah, I dig it. And because it's cropped so tight, it has that air of mystery. Like, where was this thing? Was this sitting on a beach, or was this in the front yard, or, you know, but hopefully it was in a garden, Mr. Rhino, because that's a topic. But
it could be anywhere. It's God's garden if it's out on the beach.
That's
so
true. The whole planet is a garden, right? There you go. Love it. Cool. Michael Ryno, thank you, man. This is excellent work. I can see a lot of times on the critique, Troy and I talk about just, you know, the size measurement of these images. Like, what would they look like printed big, hanging on a wall? You know, like you walking into like a high-end restaurant or a gallery or something, and you saw something like this one printed 6 foot wide or something, or even larger. Would it stand up to that? I think, you know, resolution notwithstanding, this one definitely would stand up to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially like these are the types of prints that people buy. You know, people don't buy we, as landscape photographer, I go out to Moab to shoot these phenomenal sunsets over Delicate Arch, but 9 times out of 10, people don't want that in their living room unless they live there.
Yeah.
You know, so like taking that back to Kansas City, I can't sell that in Kansas City, but I could sell this.
Yeah, that's right. I never thought about that. Yeah. Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
All right, Michael Ryno, thank you, sir. All right, next shot up is from James Glynnie. This is pretty hot.
Oh yeah, super hot.
I felt that in my taste buds just looking at this thing.
I like it. You know, I really like this because if as I said before, you know, in my introduction as F64 Academy, if you look at some of the Group F64, like the book about Group F64, I think it was Edward Weston, I believe, that did the pepper shot. Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen that one? It's a very delicate looking pepper. I believe it's Edward Weston. It's one of the Westons. If it's not him, it's his son. But you know, it's just that taking something very simple and giving it almost like, I don't know, like a personality, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
With light, just letting that light kind of travel and navigate over the image and, you know, draw the eye to the features that are in the pepper. And I see that here. I see a lot of the same idea of kind of personifying the character of these peppers. With that, I think the light might be a little hot on the left-hand side because those peppers have this really big highlight that's hitting them. And as I said, you know, that becomes the thing that my eye focuses on. So I'm almost focused more on that highlight than I am on anything else. And then I start to do that Rorschach thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, who kissed this pepper? You see lips?
Yeah, I do see lips. You know,
see lips. So and now I can't unsee it.
You know what I can't unsee? That top pepper on the left side of it looks like a little butt.
Yeah.
Now none of you can unsee that either. See,
that's true, and that's why we have to be very careful with our lights. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. But I think that the way you've got it set up, the composition, the way it's all set up, I really enjoy it. And I enjoy the little chopping block that it's on, or maybe the cutting board that it's on. And I think that this has this really nice feel to it. I cook a lot too with my kids and stuff, and this feels like I'm prepping up and we're about to get ready to go and about to start cooking this stuff up, so I can relate to it. This is an image that I want to look at a little bit further though at the end, so I'll talk about some things that we can do to help draw the eye more towards the right hand side so it's not so heavily weighted on the left hand side. Perfect. All right, so tagged, this is the one that we're gonna bring into the Rudess laboratory for some for a closer look, right? A little bit of Let There Be Light. Yeah, there you go. Let there be light. And there will be. There you go. Let there be fill light. All right. Next shot up is from Craig Stampley. All right. Let's bring this one up here. Look at those people in there. And by the way, Craig Stampley's from Australia, so he's surrounded by all kinds of critters and. Oh, so you're telling me these ants could kill me? Probably. Yeah, these are probably the most poisonous ants on the planet. Everything and that flower is probably man-eating too. I want to go to Australia. Exactly. Why not? Yeah, this is really cool. Being at the top of the food chain is overrated. Like, so. Yeah, I know. Let's just humble ourselves. Let's go to Australia. Yes. I like this. I like the very intimate look on the inside of this flower like this. And seeing like the things that happen on the daily routine that we don't see that are happening all around us that are actually probably more magical than 90% of the things that I do on my daily life. Yeah. You know, like the ants and what they do and how they're just programmed to do what they do. They can do it all they want as long as they stay out of my house. But, you know, I think what we have here is a really good portrait of that, what's happening inside that flower. I'm kind of taking my thumbs here and I'm putting them over the two ants that are blurry though. You know what I mean? So there's two blurry ants. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. If you just block those out and maybe clone those out so that the whole conversation becomes about what's inside. I wouldn't say that if it was focus stacked and everything was in focus as we went into the center of the flower, but since they're blurry, they almost draw my attention more than they do on the inside of the flower, just because my brain knows what it's supposed to be, but it wants to make it what it is, and it can't. So I keep focusing on the blurry ants. So if you kind of clone those guys out and then just make everything about the conversation that's happening on the inside of that flower, that would be really effective. And I think maybe even just taking like a curves adjustment layer and just popping it up in the midtones and getting a pretty deep curve to really brighten this up a little bit, I think would really help. There's a big division and separation between light and dark here. And this is an instance where the lights and the darks work really well together because there's a lot of them, but then the midtones aren't quite coming in there as much with that supporting effect like we saw in the other one. Not that it's not successful, it's just different. So I would probably pop up those midtones a little bit so I could see a little bit more of what's happening inside that flower.
Yeah. I like that. And I do like the suggestion of removing the blurry ants too, because holding up my fingers, it instantly makes you want to, you focus on the 4 that are inside the flower there and what are they working on in there versus, okay, I wonder where the other ones came from. Are they coming or going? It just kind of, makes this, it changes the whole story by just removing those 2 ants.
Right. And even if there's some dodging that's been done on the way into the flower, so you see all I don't even know what the parts of a flower are. I was sleeping during that part of science class. But like if you look at the 4 ants, there's like almost like a star pattern that goes out. If there was a dodge on each one of those lines to go right into the center of that too, it'd be kind of like Star Wars. Like you're shooting the center of the star.
Right.
Yeah, kind of vortex effect.
What a great world. Have you done much macro work yourself?
I have. Yeah. I like the super macro though, and I'm really weird. I'm like a crazy anomaly. I like the super macro and super wide. So if I'm doing macro, I typically like to live in like the 5x world where those ants would take up the entire frame, and then when I'm doing landscape work, I'm usually at 16 millimeters. So it's like
you're just a man of extremes.
The widest I could get and the furthest in I could get.
I love that. Yeah. So you want to see the expression on the ants' faces versus, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And a lot of times I end up going to more of an abstract realm with that too, because it is so, focused in there 5x.
Yeah.
So macro is hard, and that's why I can appreciate this piece, because it's not easy to do this stuff. The flowers are moving, your camera's moving. If you try to do macro work on a tripod, you're so limited. So like my macro rig looks like a bazooka. It's a shoulder rig, and then it's got the 5x macro on it with the twin flash, that's Canon twin flash. The only reason why I kept my Canon 6D was because of my macro rig. So I've switched over to Sony, but I've got this killer Canon macro rig that I look like I was walking through the woods with it one time as I was doing some macro work, and this guy was like, "Don't shoot me."
Yeah, exactly. And I would advise not to do any macro work in or around an airport either. So.
Yeah, exactly. Looks like I could shoot down a plane with it. It's just the weirdest looking contraption, but I can't shoot macro on a tripod. It's too restrictive.
Yeah.
So you take all these variables and you take the movement of the flowers, the movement of the things in the flower, your body movement, your flash misfiring. You just take all those things and stack them together, and everything's against you with macro work. So if you can get something like this, that's pretty good.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, that's a whole nother world. Don, do you know Don Komarechka? Have you ever heard? Yeah. So Don comes on the show from time to time, and he's like the master of macro, but he's got some sort of extra chromosome or something that allows his brain to think in multiple stacked dimensions. So his work is just ridiculous. His snowflake work especially. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I think the reason why I got that rig was because of him.
Really?
I looked at a lot of his work a long time ago. He got me into infrared photography too. He doesn't know this stuff, but I saw his stuff online. I'm like, I got to do that. Oh,
that's awesome. He'll be happy to hear that. Yeah, I'll have to have you guys both on.
I've talked to him before. We were going back and forth on email, but nothing came to fruition, unfortunately.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a
very good guy.
Yep. All right.
We both like the nerdy stuff of photography, so
I think that's part of the DNA, like art and science and technology kind of converge in photography. All right, Craig Stanfley from Down Under. Thank you, sir. All right, Lam's up next. Lam is from Malaysia, by the way. Let's bring this one up. All right. What do you think this one? There's a lot going on here.
There is a lot going on here. You basically have like 3 shots within a shot. And it's so you get the tree in the foreground, you got the squirrel running up the tree, which is a whole shot in and of itself, and then you got the child in the back that's having a blast on the swing. So I think that what I like about this is I like your ambition. This is a lot to try and get into one shot, and to get that in one shot is pretty impressive as well. But then we also have to take it and say, okay, well, yes, it's a lot in one shot, really ambitious, but now what's the star of the shot? And now, because there is so much going on with it, I don't know necessarily where to look. If we're taking that theme of movies, this is like Ocean's 13, when you have too many big name actors in the same movie, and the movie just really isn't that great because of it. They're all competing for one another.
Right.
And this is there's a lot of things in here that could be potentially great photographs, but there are so many things that are pulling me away from this one photograph being potentially great, if that makes sense. And I'm trying not to be mean about this in any way, shape, or form, just constructive. Because if we break this down, the macro stuff, we do some macro textures of that tree, phenomenal work. You could get some killer abstractions out of that. The shot of the squirrel, if you were panning with the squirrel to get the squirrel so that the squirrel was actually in focus the whole time, that would be great, because then everything else would kind of blur to oblivion while you're getting the squirrel running up the tree, right? And then in the background, that's a whole nother walk around concept where you could leave this shot, walk over to that shot, and get the expression on that child's face that I'm sure is just phenomenal. So when I'm seeing this in like 3 dimensions. I'm pulling myself out of what you're showing me, and I'm navigating around the image, and I'm seeing so much great potential for good photography. But this then becomes of like let me see how much I can do in one thing. And then it's like, oh, wait, hold on a second. I can't really focus on what it is that you want me to focus on. But there's a lot of beautiful texture in that tree. There's a great motion that's happening in that squirrel that if you panned with it, everything else would blur out, which become kind of crazy, because you'd see these orange and yellow streaks everywhere, and then the squirrel would be in perfect sharp focus in an ideal world. And then you got that concept of taking the pictures of the kid.
Yeah, I agree. So there's multiple shots here. Yeah, here you go. I like the analogy of Ocean's 13 or 11 or 12 or whatever, where there's a lot of heroes in the shot, and you got to pick one, right?
Yeah.
So pick one and write it. Kind of like what you were saying about the painting one wall blue, right? Having one thing to focus on. We talk about that on the show in the critique sessions a lot, where you look at a shot and you hit it up on the head an image or so ago. You're talking about who's the hero of the shot, who's the star, and who are the supporting characters. If everyone's on the stage trying to recite Shakespeare at the same time, you end up with a mess that's not Shakespeare, right? So, or not Shakespearean. So yeah, I love it. Cool. You got me wanting to do macro shots now.
It's fun. It's addicting though.
Yeah. Cool. All right, Lamb. Thank you, sir. All right, moving right along. Next shot is from Joshua Sommerfeld. I think Joshua's somewhere in your area in the Midwest.
Oh, hello, Joshua. This is very fairy tale-esque. I really enjoy that aspect of it. It's like I can almost smell the area around it, and I can kind of feel that flower bouncing up and down, in my vision as I'm walking past, with the sun flare coming through. And there's a lot here that I think is working in your favor when it comes to that, and the delicate nature of how you've treated the darkest dark areas in the photograph by lifting those really deep pockets of black. It keeps my eye from going to them, and it keeps the conversation between the highlight in the background, the bright highlight in the background, and the flower in the foreground. Well, sorry, I just got a phone call there.
Oh, no worries.
I'm waiting on a really important package, so
this is live TV, so it's all good.
Yeah. Okay. So what I would suggest here, though, is to help that conversation along is some type of masked. And what I'm going to show with the chili pepper, you could do the exact same thing with this flower. And it's basically what I call making a radial spotlight, which is just a nice big hit of color and light in one spot to help draw the conversation between one spot and another. So you got a great conversation happening back there with the highlight. I just want to see a little bit more light on the underside of the rose. I know that's literally impossible, okay, unless you have a fill flash with you and you put that flash underneath there to get that light to hit the rose. But you can fake that later in Photoshop just for the sake of making that conversation stronger, because I think the processing you have here is very delicate. It's very nice. All the surrounding area that's there, and there's a beautiful conversation happening between the rose and that highlight, but that highlight is so bright that it's distracting me from the rose, but we can still draw the eye into that. So what I'm going to show with the chili pepper, take that same concept and you'll just put it like boom right underneath that rose.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
If it's a rose, it might be something different. I don't know.
Yeah. What do you think of the rim light on there? I think that's fantastic too.
It is. That's gorgeous, and that's what makes it. So like typically when it comes to shooting, we have to decide what type of lighting we're going to use with that one directional light that we have. That's the sun, right? So that rim light, obviously beautiful. And I think, from what I can tell is that you probably lifted a lot of these shadows anyway in order to be able to get even that much light on the underside of the rose. So what we're going to do with this in Photoshop to just add a little spotlight there is about as much cheating as it would be to increase the shadows in Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw. Yeah. So
that's not cheating. It's using tools, right?
Right. Well, you're not cheating, you're not trying.
Yeah. Love it. Cool. Joshua, thank you. I love Joshua's work because he's at such a range, and I've seen his range in sort of broaden over time. And Joshua will submit anything from like an alligator all the way through to a spider to a flower like this, and it's always got him in it.
That's cool.
Very cool. Very cool.
It's very good. Yeah, having that artistic vision and having that come through is awesome.
Yeah, it's a consistency. Yeah, it's like a consistency that comes out of him. Very good stuff. All right, and last but not least is from Michael DeRay. All right.
I'll go first to be last.
Yeah. Look at that.
That's
when I first
really
saw
cool.
this one, I thought of like some sort of insect, some sort of weird alien insect that you do not want to find in your shower.
Yeah. I went to art school and we had to paint we had to make something small look large. So I found a picture of like a bed bug online that was just giant, and I painted that. And this reminds me of that because of all the little tentacles and the texture and stuff on there. It's very spider-like.
Yeah.
In a way that, when I look at this, I know that this is probably, one of those like evergreen type of trees or something. That's what it looks like to me anyway, or maybe a succulent type of plant. But I have a tree that's very similar to this in my backyard that it's an evergreen. As far as like the way the things are growing out there and stuff, the petals or leaves or whatever that might be. So I know that's what it is. But my brain keeps saying, no, that's not what this is. This is a spider. This is a butterfly. This is something coming right at you. And what helps that is that mysterious darkness that's underneath the highlights, because I don't know what's back there. So there's a sense of mystery that's underneath there. If I saw a bunch of this all stacked underneath it, I would be like, okay, boom, it's a flower, or okay, it's a tree, or okay, it's a bush. But this, the way it's fanning out and then that pitch blackness underneath there, I can see something under there. It looks like it might be legs or something like that, but that could be an extension of this hideous spider creature. You know what I mean?
It could be, or it could be the remnants of the body that this thing has just consumed. Right?
Absolutely.
It's like there's a shoe down there.
But then going with that sepia tone look on here, it kind of gives it that kind of plate look like what you would see under a microscope, So it's not straight black and white. It's kind of got this dye tone to it, which then again helps add to that mystery. So all those things combined are great. One thing I would refrain from, and this might be just a digital thing or whatever, when it comes to frames around an image, I feel like they box things in. So looking at this, my eye wants to continue these tentacle-like legs, but then I've got this white border that's saying, no, stop, I want you to look at this. No, stop, you can't leave the image, you have to look here. Now, when we put this in a matte and it's in a frame, of course, it's going to stop when it gets to that edge, but we know that to be a matte. You know what I mean? But then in the digital world, when you have a white border with a black border, it's basically like, this is the end. You can't go any further. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Is that good or is that bad to have that? And I'm going
debate.
somewhere with this. I have a follow-up question.
That's up for debate. On this one, I don't think I would do it. I'm kind of boxing this out with my fingers and doing that like Vogue type thing. And, the tighter I get on this little creature looking thing in there, the more I'm like, wow, this is so impactful. And I think that border just kind of stops my eye from being able to move and navigate around the piece. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But then again, if you want me to stop and not look outside this because you want me to see this thing that we've kind of personified this to be, then it keeps me there. You know what I mean? So this is one of those things where if I were the artist on this, I would look at it both ways and I would see, okay, does this stop the eye? Do I want the eye to stop or do I want the eye to continue?
Yeah. I think the takeaway from that is, and the reason I asked that is because Troy Miller, who does the critiques with me, normally he's a big fan of the key line and the border around prints to trap the image and to keep your eye contained within the frame. And I'm not necessarily. I think it's you could do it on an as needed basis, but not as a rule, right? So yeah. So I was curious to see what you thought about that.
I think, every once in a while my critique sessions, I get them and I'd say it's like a 90-10 for me. 90% of the time I say, don't do it. 10% I say, okay, go ahead. Yeah. And it just depends on the image. Like some images you want to be boxed into. This one, I kind of like the flow. If you take your fingers and do the little, viewfinder thing on this and just look at the content of the image, so you see me?
Yeah.
It's so impactful. It really is. It's like, whoa, I feel like I just transported into another world. So then to put that box around there just is like, oh, okay, well, I'm back to planet Earth, Blake. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Interesting.
Either way, it's a successful piece. I'm being nitpicky on a border. You know what I mean? When the content of the image is really well done.
It's stunning. Yeah, it's stunning. Yeah, it's like you could. It does its job of intriguing you and pulling you into the image and making you think about what's going on here. Even the negative space in there makes you think about what's happening. A slight non sequitur. Where do you fall on watermarking images?
If I'm doing them for my critiques are 100% anonymous, so I prefer that people don't put them in there. I don't mind them if they're used very subtly and with tact. So like to me that means very subtle, maybe a 40 to 50% opacity in the bottom or the lower right hand side, preferably with no pictures. I've seen some people do like a little camera thing. I just like a name that looks like a signature, a little like a hand font that just says photography or something underneath. Just something very simple that isn't distracting. That painters signed their images in the lower right hand corner. I used to be a painter, and we all signed our paintings in the lower right hand corner or on the frame on the edge of the border of the canvas. So I don't mind them. I just want them to be used with tact. So like the only time you'll ever see me use one is if I post something to social media and I know it's going to be big, basically event based. So like just recently everyone knows the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. I haven't really said it enough in my community, but so out here in Kansas City, it's just been phenomenal. I took this shot. I put like 8 shots together in order to get this beautiful panoramic scene of Kansas City, and I knew it was going to be huge. So I put it on my Facebook page, and in the lawn of the memorial here, I put my watermark. And thankfully I did. And I tell you, out of the last 45 to 50 images I've put out, that's the only one I've ever put a watermark on. But the nature of Facebook, people took it from my page and they made it their cover photos all over the internet. So now because of where I put it, and these people aren't photographers, they're just people on Facebook. Now I've got my watermark on everyone's page, but it's tastefully done. It says Blake Rudis Photography. It's it's like a 40% opacity just sitting there right in the lawn. Doesn't distract from the photo. Typically, if you make it 100%, so it's white. Again, what have we said about the areas of highest highlight? Our eye's going to go right to it. So is your piece now about your name, or is your piece about your piece? Right. So if you make it 100% opacity, I'm like, Blake Rudis Photography.
Right. And then you go look at the image. You look at, read the name and then look at the image. And
it's constantly going like this, drawing me down there, drawing me down there, drawing me down there. So it's lower opacity. Sometimes I'll even play with blend if a little bit so that it looks like it's becoming a part of the piece. You can do that too, so that like you basically use blend if to say only apply this to the midtones. So then in the darker areas and lighter areas, the watermark disappears, and you just kind of see this thing in the midtones. Just make it as subtle as possible, I think, and watermarks can work. Now, my pet peeve with watermarks is when people put a beautiful shot online and then have their watermark on the subject matter and then in the lower right hand corner. It's like, okay, as if I didn't get it enough.
Right, right.
Like, and you and I both know that I could just take the patch tool, go,
oh yeah, in 10 seconds, or just crop it out. Yeah.
So when it comes to like, online posting to Facebook, I would highly recommend it for everybody, because you never know who's going to see your piece and who's going to take it and put it as their cover photo. Like what just happened to me, there's like 30 people in Kansas City that are rocking that as their cover photo right now.
That's nice. That's nice.
So,
yeah. Again, it goes back to, it just depends, right? On what's happening, like with the key line or the border, it depends, which is art. All of art is, it depends. And this shot is really, I keep going back to it. So really, really well done. All right. So normally, Blake, on these shows, we do a pick or sort of a favorite. And you and I spoke before. I think our favorite for this particular episode is going to be Michael Ryno's, this guy. You agree?
I think so. I agree. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah,
I like it. Very tastefully done. Very well managed from the shooting all the way through the post production.
Mm-hmm.
So
excellent work. Would you, in hindsight, I know the whole purpose of a vignette is to draw the viewer's attention to a particular part of the image. But in a shot like this, do you think it would benefit from a vignette, or would that take away from it?
I think it would take away. So like when I'm looking at this, I see the center of the succulent, and then I see this blast that's just working its way out, and then it kind of sucks me back in. So I think if the vignette is on there, if it's a black vignette, it's going to box me in. Yeah. If it's a white vignette, it's just going to go away to nothing. And if you're using white vignettes, then you're in the wrong era. You're like 50 years away from where you should be.
What are you saying? White vignettes are no longer vogue?
Oh, dude. I can't. My mom does it all the time. Like, Mom, stop doing white vignettes. But she'll white vignette everything. Like, it's a picture of my son playing basketball with a giant white vignette around him. Like, is this like the 1970s like Sears catalog? Come on.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
But people kind of superimposed in the clouds looking down. We talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I think a vignette would kind of. And as I squint my eyes, all I see is the highlights of these succulents, and everything just kind of goes to black, and that's really nice too. And I think if you put a vignette around there, it's going to stop all that beautiful action from radiating out and then sucking back in.
And definitely no border. Definitely no border or key line on this one, right?
No.
Yep.
Because you want that in and out type of feel.
Love it. All right. Well, Michael Ryno, congratulations, man.
Very good.
All right. You wanna switch over and do a screen share and show us what you would do to the Red Hot Chili Peppers?
Sure. So what I was saying before about adding like a subtle hint of light that could just make this pop. There's many ways that you can do this. If you're in Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw, you're probably going into an adjustment brush or maybe a radial filter. But I like to do this in Photoshop, and I like to do that with the gradient tool. And the gradient tool, when you first use it, you say, why would I ever use this? But if we turn this into a radial gradient, okay, once we hit radial gradient on there, we can move this around. See that? Now, I'm going to put this right here, and I don't want that to be black. Actually, if I click right here, I can change the color of this gradient. So I'm going to double click this color. I'm going to change this to like a subtle yellow. Okay, press OK. Okay, and then this side we have to change the yellow too because it's transitioning into black over there. So we'll just maybe even just transition that into white. So it's a little subtle yellow pop that transitions into white in the background. Press OK. Press OK. So that's the setup here. So then when I double click this, if you want to move it, you can't just move this layer. So I'll double click this, and I can move this wherever I want. I can change the scale. I can change the scale.
I can change the scale.
I can change the scale anytime I want. I'm gonna drop it down like this. So I'm gonna put the scale down to about 89%. But I could, if you really want to pinpoint this to be able to find it, put it to 5%, and then you can say, okay, I want this to be exactly right here, and then you can start moving that scale up. Okay, so I want that to be about 89%, as I said before. Now the real magic here doesn't happen until you use a blend mode. And one of the blend modes that I like to use is called hard mix, which is a trash blend mode. But it's not trash if you use the fill adjustment. There are 8 blend modes here that use fill to control them. So when I hit this at fill and drop this down to about 15%,
wow,
a little bit higher here. now it looks like I'm actually using a light. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
So if I double click this now, I can get this dialed in exactly where I want it to be. So now we had, in this image, we had this side of the photo that was completely distracting us because of the high highlights there. But we actually kind of liked those after we looked at our Rorschach test of, the butt and the lips. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to hit this over here, and now look how it evens everything out. You see that? It's magic.
That is magic, yeah. That is really cool.
Okay. Now, if you want that fill to be higher, it's going to increase the light that's there. Okay, now this is the hard mix blend mode. Traditionally, the hard mix blend mode is a trash blend mode, but use fill. I'm telling you, fill is like the key here, okay? So with that at about 45%, that looks great. So now we're actually getting the eye to transition from those areas of highest highlight over to that right-hand side by drawing some attention to this highlight here that was missed a little bit. So this kind of void action that we had here, we kind of lost that in the void. If you double-click this, though, and you, again, want to dial that into exactly where you want that to be, see it right there, that little dot?
Yep.
I'm going to bring that up to about a little bit higher. You don't want to bring it up too high because then it's going to saturate that area over there. Now, hard mix and linear light are distant cousins. So I usually check both of them, okay? Mm-hmm. So hard mix is going to add contrast while adding color, and it's going to be very powerful. Linear light is going to more likely add contrast and a subtle hint of color. So if this is 45% with hard mix, you saw the amount of contrast it brought. But if I bring this down to 15% with linear light, it just brings light. So do you want light or do you want contrast? If you want just light, bring linear light in. If you want contrast and light or saturation and light, use hard mix.
Would you ever do two separate adjustment layers so you could have individual control over both of those things?
Sure, we could try that. Let's just grab this. I'll just double click this. I'm going to move this more over here to get that highlight right there, which is really nice.
Yep.
Press Command or Control J, and then change this to linear light. Drop that down to about 10%. Double click, move this up here. And that would be a way that you could use both of them together. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then what could also kind of help this out too is if we popped on a curves adjustment layer and did that matte effect, that cinematic look. We bring that up a little bit. Oh boy. Oh, my heart just kind of skipped a little bit there.
Look at that.
Oh, good golly. What are you doing to me?
Red Hot Chili Peppers right there.
It is nice. And it's just, it's a subtle little thing. These are things that you just can't do in Adobe Camera Raw or Lightroom. I always refer to Adobe Camera Raw because I don't use Lightroom, but they're basically the same thing as far as the engine is concerned for raw processing. You just don't have this kind of control, and even here, like I like to go into this thing called blend if. So if I double click here, I can say, okay, well, I like this pop in this curve that we have right here, but I don't want it to affect my highlights into my midtones. So if I bring this down like this, it's only going to affect the shadowy areas. Alt or Option to feather this over and get a nice smooth transition. So it's only hitting the shadows into the midtones.
I love that. See, that's how precise you can get in Photoshop. Right. But have you used tools like Capture One and their sort of color selection tools and their superpowers when it comes to color?
No, I do a lot of my own stuff. So like I build panels and stuff. So like this is my panel that I have over here that does all my color grading for me. I'd like to keep everything in one place. So I know that there's programs and plugins that do great things out there, but I like to keep everything in a very smooth workflow so I don't have to bounce from place to place. Yeah. If you're using Capture One as the beginning of your workflow, then that's great. But I'm studying neuroscience of all things, and when you look at neuroscience and you look at the way programs are built, you really have to find a program that adapts to the way your brain thinks. Okay. Yeah. So I've opened Capture One like 100 times and I've closed it 101. I can't. My brain and Capture One don't work together.
Isn't that interesting? And that's a good point to draw a circle around, because a lot of people they'll someone will tell them that, hey, software X, Y, and Z is the best thing since sliced bread, and you have to get this camera and these lights, or you're an idiot, and they'll follow that. And going by what you're talking about, like neuroscience and our programming, that may be wrong for you, right?
Absolutely.
Right. And in the end, it's not about the tools; it's about the end result from the tools. So try not to get caught in that whirlpool.
Right. And it's like I've got. I don't know what do you call that? The little hand drill thing, in my garage. Yeah. And I had the same one for like 20 years, and then it died, and I had to buy a new one. And man, you'd have thought that like I could never use a drill ever again. You know what I mean? Because I had to retrain my brain for a totally different tool that was the same tool.
Yeah.
And that's what we go through here when it comes to processing stuff. So I used to be one of those people who whoever was paying me, I would talk about their software. And I'm just going to be honest, because I didn't have any money when I first started doing all this stuff.
Yeah.
So, you know, if Topaz would pay me, I'd do it. If On One would pay me, I would figure out a way to use it. If Capture One would pay me, or Luminar, or if any of those programs would want to pay me, I would work with it. But then I got to a point where I was like, you know what? I need to start developing stuff for me that works for me, because I can't be bouncing around to this. Because what I found out was that the more I talked about things, the more people bought it, and the more emails I would get saying, hey, this doesn't work for me. Why'd you tell me to buy it? And then I'd be like, well, crap, now I feel bad. So then I started thinking to myself, well, why do people do that? So now I'm thinking like the second, third order effects of telling someone just by doing a tutorial on something, somebody will go out and buy it. So now I'm very selective about what I show, and pretty much everyone's using Adobe Camera Raw or Lightroom to some degree. So I feel that's a safe place for me to play. And then also all the software that I develop for Photoshop is all Photoshop.
Yeah.
So it keeps my workflow seamless, and it keeps my brain in one place so that I don't have to worry about the distractions of the programs, and I can just dive in there. And after 20 years of using the same thing over and over and over again, and knowing that there is nothing better than Photoshop, period, hands down. You've seen what I've done here with precision excellence.
Yeah.
You can't do this anywhere else. Not with this type of speed, with this type of accuracy, and with for the most part, this level of stability.
Yeah, it's so interesting that there are factions within the photography world, right? You know, you got to use this, and a lot of it's Stockholm syndrome, or I call it digital Stockholm syndrome, where you spend all this money on and invest all this time and money on a particular solution, and now you're kind of beholden to that, and you got to justify it to yourself, whether it be camera brand or software or spouse, whatever, you know.
I'm beholden to my wife.
Exactly. Well, we're 10 years in now. I might as well stay, right? So, but you know, but like you say, what you say makes a lot of sense. You know, pick a horse. Like pick a horse and ride the heck out of that horse and love that horse, whether for its shortcomings and positives. Keeping in mind, in the end, what it's all about is the end result from that horse, right?
Exactly.
It's the destination where that horse is going to get you to. So
that's why I drive a Rubicon, because it can take me anywhere.
You and that Rubicon, man. I need some photos of you like fording through a river or something with that Rubicon. I want to see what it can do. I'm
going to put a saddle on top of it and just sit on it, just like this for you.
You and that Rubicon. That Rubicon's like your horse. You're like the Lone Ranger and what's that? What was the Lone Ranger's horse's name?
Geronimo?
Trigger.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Name your Rubicon Trigger. There you go.
I haven't named it yet. I'm being very cautious about that.
There you go. Trigger. Or go back to the Matrix and name it the Nebuchadnezzar, right? It's too small for that. It's too small. Well, cool, man. This is awesome. Thanks for doing this, and thanks for recording that and or doing that demo. That's fantastic. As you know, you clearly know what you're talking about with Photoshop. So what kind of stuff do you talk about on your site, like in the different Photoshop tutorials and stuff that you do? Is it niche down like these little bits of this is how you do some fill light in here, or do you get more macro with it?
No, I go real deep. So like, you know, when I first started F64 Elite, I said I'm going to do a course every month, and trying to think of a way to do a course every month. I tried to go high level, and then you're only going to do 5 courses, you know, because if you stay this high, then, you know, what can you do at that high level? So I would take every little topic and break it down into these little teeny tiny like macro concepts of, you know, doing a 3-hour course on cropping. You know, you wouldn't think that you could do a 3-hour course on cropping, but you really break down the different types of cropping for print, cropping for the web, cropping for this, cropping for the subject matter, cropping for, you know, you think about all the different ways you can crop, you get to that micro level. So I like to just take something in Photoshop, beat it up for like a week before I even talk to somebody about it. So like trying to figure out the hard mix blend mode. You know, when people are saying, oh, the hard mix is crap, don't use hard mix. Are you kidding me? It's my favorite blend mode now. You know, other people out there would say hard mix and linear light are the worst blend modes to use. Linear light's great for doing like really high end sharpening, but that's typically what I use it for, because someone saw someone do a tutorial with linear light and a high pass and said, okay, that's the only way to use linear light. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I like to go in and take really deep dives on things and look at, and really a lot of times what I get out of my critique sessions are problem solving things that I've had to do for other people that I found in Photoshop that then I take and bring into F64 Academy on the YouTube channel and refine it. So like during a critique, I might show someone how to fix that with the hard mix blend mode, and they'll be like, oh crap, that would be a great tutorial if I took the time to refine it and make it almost like a textbook.
Yeah.
So that's
I like that. Yeah, finding little nuggets and then diving deep on that nugget so that yeah, that's fantastic. Cool, man. All right. So
the problem is you end up with a lot of nuggets.
Well, that's good. That's good. Well, that's how the Earth was made, right? It's basically a bunch of little, nuggets together, and then it squeezes together, makes a sphere, and it gets its own gravity, and then it starts attracting moons, and it's all good. It's all good.
Aliens,
aliens, and life occurs. Don't get me going with that. Well, cool, man. So once again, f64academy.com is the site, and then f64elite.com is the community, right?
Mm-hmm. So F64 Academy is like all the free Photoshop tutorials and stuff, and like my free repository of Photoshop tutorials. And then F64 Elite is like, okay, I liked what you did here, but I want a deeper dive. That's F64 Elite. I do a lot of stuff on there: courses, critique sessions, live events, challenges, challenge feedback sessions, extended vlog content, all kinds of stuff. So
love it. All right. Well, I guess the last thing to do for this critique is to pick a topic for next week.
So on one thing that's successful. So at the beginning of every month, I do a challenge on F64 Elite, and the challenge this month that I put out for people is the negative space challenge. And basically, it's the idea of using the negative space around an image to create a positive atmosphere for your subject matter. So you find something that, like a tree. You've probably seen this. It's an Ansel Adams shot. It's just a tree, and then there's all this white space around it. But without that white space, there'd be chaos in between all the little things. So that negative space, which we call it negative space, is actually the most positive thing that's happening in the photo.
I like it. So then what's the topic? Negative space?
Negative space. Whatever that means to you, yeah.
Negative space. However you choose to interpret that, negative space. So, and our community tends to be really creative. Some members are more creative than others, but they tend to be really, really creative when it comes to interpreting these topics. So I'm interested to see what they come up with negative space. So that's
cool.
Perfect. Someone's gonna, I guarantee, I shouldn't even say it because I'm gonna lead the witness, but I think someone's gonna come up with an inverted Milky Way shot. It's negative space, right? So,
that's true. Negative space. Yeah. It's gonna be you. You're gonna do it anonymously.
I might do it. That's a good idea. I should like create a avatar persona, so I could go into the community and pretend like I'm somebody else, so I could, say nice things about me. Like, Frederick is awesome. You guys think so? Yeah. He's amazing.
Be your own whip.
Exactly. My own PR person. Oh, cool, man.
I've done that. As crazy as that sounds,
You've done that?
I've emailed other companies and been like, I'm so-and-so, Blake Rudis's, secretary. He was really curious if you'd be interested in letting him, use this piece of gear, whatever that might be. And they'd be like, absolutely. How do we get a hold of Blake? And they're like, well, you have to do everything through me, but I'll get it to Blake. And I'm telling you, awesome. That got me the gear. What didn't get me the gear is me, Blake, saying, hey, I'm Blake, and I'd like to test this gear.
Interesting. That's gold. Okay. Yeah. All right. But see, I'd have to get like a voice disguiser because people recognize my voice. I have to get some sort of thing to make my voice different.
Just don't get a creepy one. Hi,
I'm Frederick Johnson.
I'm Frederick Van Johnson's secretary. You're going to give me that stuff.
He would like an Oculus Rift.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now, you got to start seeing a bunch of gear behind me and like, hey, the tip from Blake worked like gangbusters. Cool. All right. Well, thank you for coming on, man. I appreciate you. This has been a treat and fantastic. And I would encourage the members to go check your stuff out too, because it's fantastic, high quality, and you've probably forgotten more about Photoshop and photography than most of us know. So that's good stuff. That's good stuff.
I just experiment and report my experiments. That's
what it's all about, right? Experimentation. Because if you box everything or frame everything in a frame of this is just an experiment, then it becomes easier because failure is it's still just an experiment result versus I've failed at this thing. You know, I approach a lot of things in life, including TWiP like that. It's all, you know, I'm trying new things, you know, and see what sticks, what doesn't, what works, you do more of that. What doesn't work, you do less of that, and, you know, rinse and repeat. So
it works phenomenally when you're married too.
Wait a minute. Are you saying marriage is an experiment? You might want to lower your voice. Lower your voice.
I know.
She's listening. That is yeah, okay.
In the back. I heard that.
I'm not taking that bait. I'm not going down that road with you, man. You're alone. You can walk that road alone there.
I do.
All right, man. Well, cool. Well, we'll see you next time. You're more than welcome to come back on and do critiques anytime. So whenever you're free, just let me know. This is TWiP.